Trespassing looks like a thrill until there is no turning back. These cases prove that when the line is crossed, a heavy price is already waiting inside. From a worker who went through a broken fence thinking it was an easy way out, to a man balancing on a slick divider above a swirling treatment tank, until one wrong move changed everything. Hi, I'm Nathan, and this is Fatal Files. It was March 14, 2016, behind a row of small warehouses in Fresno. There was a dirt path people had made over time, cutting across a set of train tracks. Signs were posted telling people to stay out, but they were old and easy to ignore if you were in a rush. On one side of the tracks, a line of parked freight cars and a storage building partially blocked the view down the rail. Brian Gage was 27. He worked late hours and often felt tired after his shift. He was the kind of person who liked simple routines and didn't like going out of his way. That shortcut across the tracks saved him a few minutes, and he used it almost every night. He always wore big headphones, playing music loud enough to block everything else out. People he worked with had warned him before. They had seen trains pass through while he crossed, but Brian trusted the path because he had used it so many times. That night, he was trying to catch the last bus. He had already lost time at work and didn't want to wait for the next one. Instead of walking around to the marked crossing, he went straight for the broken part of the fence. It was something he had done so often that it didn't feel risky anymore. To him, it was just faster. I've rushed like that before, thinking a few minutes mattered more than caution. Those are the moments where I think the shortcut feels like the smart choice. But looking back, I realize those minutes aren't worth the risk you take to save time. He stepped through the gap and onto the first track. His head was slightly down and his headphones covered both ears. At the same time, a freight train was moving along the second track, coming from his left. It was going around 45 miles per hour, already blowing its horn for a crossing up ahead. The ground near Brian didn't shake much where he stood. The tracks were spaced apart, and the gravel under his feet didn't carry strong vibrations. From where he was, there was little warning besides the horn, which he could not hear. Brian walked across the first track without stopping. He kept moving at a steady pace, crossing straight over the tracks in a direct line. The train was closing the distance quickly. The person driving the train saw him and began sounding the horn again, longer this time. Emergency brakes were applied, and sparks started to form under the wheels as they pressed hard against the rails. But trains cannot stop fast. Even with the brakes on, it kept moving forward, covering ground quickly. Brian stepped over the first track and onto the second. Because he crossed directly instead of angling, he stayed fully exposed on the active track as he took his next step forward. As he shifted his footing, he began to lift his head slightly, as if about to check his surroundings. But by then, the train was already too close to react. The impact caused heavy injuries right away. His chest was crushed, and his ribs broke inward. His head struck the rocks, causing severe damage. His arms and legs were also broken from the way his body hit the ground. The train continued moving forward for several hundred yards before it could fully stop. The train operator reported the incident right after it happened. Emergency crews arrived and found Brian beside the tracks. His headphones were still on, though one side was broken from the impact. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The cause was blunt force injuries from being struck by the train. It makes me wonder, why did Brian keep slipping through that broken fence, even with warning signs posted? Investigators later reviewed the area and his habits. They confirmed he had entered a restricted zone and used an unapproved crossing point. The headphones played a major role, blocking the sound of the horn and reducing his awareness of the train's approach. The partial obstruction from nearby rail cars and buildings also limited how early he could have seen the train coming from that direction. They also noted the worn dirt path and damaged fence as signs that others had been crossing there too, even though it was not allowed. Still, the responsibility stayed with Brian's decision to enter the area and not stay aware of his surroundings. Investigators pointed out that the train crew followed proper steps, including sounding the horn and applying the brakes as soon as they saw him. There was no sign of failure from the train side, and nothing blocked Brian's view except his own focus downward. In the end, it came down to a mix of routine and choice. He trusted a shortcut that didn't give him time to react. The findings were clear. Trespassing, reduced awareness from headphones, and delayed reaction were the main reasons this happened. What happened to Brian came down to routine, doing the same risky thing until it felt safe. But the next story isn't about routine at all. It's about someone trying to prove something in a place where even the air itself wasn't safe. It was July 9, 2017 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A small welding shop sat locked up for the night. Doors closed, windows shut, no fans moving the air. Inside, the space was tight and still. Jane Thorpe was 19 years old. She had just left a trade program and wanted to prove she could handle welding gear, even though she didn't have much training. Friends described her as stubborn, someone who pushed ahead when she wanted to show off. That night, she and two friends forced open a rear panel to sneak inside. Her goal was simple: light the torch and prove she could control it. I think about being 19 and wanting to prove myself too, but breaking into a shop at night feels like a choice that was already heading toward trouble. The shop smelled strongly of gas. Cylinders of acetylene and oxygen were already hooked up to a torch system left from earlier work. The place was sealed tight, no airflow, no open windows. Her friends noticed the odor right away and hesitated, but Jane brushed it off. She walked straight to the workstation, determined to show she could light the torch. She reached for the valves, not fully understanding how sensitive the gas flow controls were. First, she opened the acetylene valve. Gas began to hiss into the line and leak slightly from the torch tip. Then she opened the oxygen valve as well. The torch line hadn't been purged, and no safety devices like flashback arresters were attached. For several seconds, no more than 10 to 15, gas continued to flow into the immediate area around the workstation. The smell grew sharper, concentrated near the torch, and dispersing unevenly in the still air rather than settling low to the floor. Her friends shifted uneasily near the doorway, but Jane stayed focused, holding the torch out in front of her. I've been in rooms where a strong smell made me step back right away. Hearing this, I can't help but think why she ignored it. She held a lighter near the tip, clicking it again and again while gas continued to escape. On one attempt, the flame finally caught at the torch nozzle. In that instant, the fire didn't just stay at the tip, it traveled backward into the hose line, a flashback, because of the gas mixture and open valves. At the same time, the small cloud of mixed gases lingering around the torch ignited. It wasn't a large explosion, but a tight, fast flash fire localized around the workstation. Flames flared outward briefly from the torch area, creating a sudden burst of heat rather than a room-filling blast. Jane was standing less than 2 feet away. Her clothes ignited almost instantly. The heat surged across her upper body. Startled, she stumbled backward and slammed into a metal table behind her. Her injuries were severe: burns across her face, arms, and torso, damage to her airway from breathing in hot gases, and blunt trauma from hitting the equipment. Her friends panicked and ran out, calling for help once they were outside. I picture how fast this must have happened, seconds from a spark to a full fire. It makes me think about how little time people really have when they ignore danger signs. Emergency services arrived, but the damage was already done. The fire stayed mostly around the workstation, confirming it was a flash fire, not a full building blaze. Jane was found on the floor near the torch setup. Her death was confirmed at the scene. The cause was listed as burn trauma and inhalation of hot gases. Investigators later explained that a brief release of acetylene and oxygen near the torch, combined with her attempt to ignite it without purging the line, created a volatile mixture at the nozzle. The absence of flashback arresters allowed the flame to travel backward into the system, intensifying the fire in seconds. The official findings were clear. Jane Thorpe died because she lit a torch in an enclosed shop where gas had been allowed to escape and collect near her workspace. The flash fire was triggered by her own actions, and the lack of ventilation made the situation more dangerous. Stories like this show how little choices can add up to a big mistake you can't fix. Jane wanted to prove what she could do, but she only showed how fast things go wrong when you ignore safety. And here's the part that sticks with me. Her friends walked away unharmed, but they had to live with what they saw. That's another kind of consequence people forget about. When someone makes a reckless choice, it doesn't just end with them. It leaves scars on everyone around. Even now, I think about how this story shows the danger of trespassing in places you don't belong. A shop like that isn't just locked for business reasons. It's locked because what's inside can be deadly if handled wrong. Jane's story shows how fast things can turn with just one spark. But the next case doesn't involve fire. It starts with curiosity and ends with something that was never meant to be touched in the first place. It was November 3, 2015 in Mesa, Arizona. A private outdoor shooting range was closed for the night. The gates were locked, but a section of fencing had been damaged, leaving an opening big enough for someone to slip through. Earlier that day, shooters had used the range, and some equipment was still left on the benches, including a pistol that hadn't been properly cleared. Jing Minter was 31 years old. He worked as a freelance media creator, always chasing unusual shots for his videos and photos. People who knew him said he liked sneaking into places he wasn't supposed to be, thinking it gave him unique content. That night, his motive was clear. He wanted footage of himself handling a firearm, even though the range was closed. I get wanting your content to stand out, especially when you're trying to build something of your own. But breaking into a place like this just to get a shot, it already feels like the kind of risk that's easy to underestimate. He walked past the broken fence and into the range. The area was quiet, no staff around, no lights except the dim glow from nearby street lamps. On one of the benches sat a semi-automatic pistol. It had been used earlier that day, and due to a lapse during closing, it was left with a magazine inserted and a round still chambered. Jing picked it up, holding it close to his face as he tried to frame angles for his camera. He pulled the slide back slightly, just enough to see movement, but not far enough to eject the chambered round, then let it snap forward again. He didn't realize the firearm was still loaded. I've seen people handle things they don't fully understand, thinking a quick check is enough. But with something like this, being even slightly wrong can mean everything. He shifted the pistol in his hands, adjusting his grip while focusing more on how it looked on camera than how he was holding it. His finger drifted onto the trigger as the muzzle angled upward toward his face. The weapon discharged instantly. The bullet entered under his chin and exited through the top of his skull. He collapsed beside the bench. The spent casing landed on the concrete nearby. The range stayed empty through the night. His body wasn't discovered until the next morning when staff arrived to open the facility. They found him on the ground with the pistol beside him and the casing close by. Death was confirmed at the scene. The cause was gunshot trauma. Investigators later explained that the firearm had been left loaded after prior use and not properly cleared. They noted that a partial slide check can give a false impression of safety if not done correctly, especially by someone untrained. Jing's handling of it, combined with unauthorized access, directly led to the discharge. It makes me think about how easily something can be mistaken for harmless when you treat it like a prop instead of what it really is. In his mind, this was just part of a video, but the risk didn't change just because the intention did. The official conclusion was simple. Jing Minter died because he entered a closed range, picked up a firearm that wasn't cleared, and handled it without proper awareness. The accident was ruled preventable, tied to trespassing and unsafe handling. What really sticks with me is how small the moment was. It wasn't a long chain of events, just a few seconds of assuming everything was fine. That's all it took. And here's what makes me pause. The gun wasn't supposed to be touched by anyone after hours, but because he slipped in, he became the one to encounter it in that state. That single mistake, combined with his decision to trespass, created the outcome. I think a lot of people chase moments like this, trying to capture something different, something that stands out. But sometimes the line between a unique shot and a fatal mistake is thinner than it looks. His story also highlights how curiosity and ambition can push people past safe limits. Jing wanted content that stood out, but he didn't think about the risks of handling a weapon without training or supervision. The investigators closed the case with a clear finding: unauthorized entry, unsafe handling, and a loaded firearm left behind were the direct causes. It wasn't fate or chance. It was preventable. And when I think about it more, it's not just about what happened to him. It's about how quickly a normal moment can turn when you're in a place you shouldn't be, doing something you don't fully understand. That's what makes this one hard to shake. We've got more shocking trespassing tragedies coming up, so hit that subscribe button if you want to see how a simple "do not enter" sign turned into a deadly mistake. Jing walked into a place he thought was empty, but something dangerous was still waiting. In the next story, someone doesn't just walk in, they climb into the danger itself without realizing it was still alive. It was February 21, 2018 in Dayton, Ohio. A bowling alley had been shut down for maintenance, but the rear service door wasn't secured. Behind the lanes, the pin setter machines were still powered, left running in a testing mode used by technicians after hours. The system was set to cycle automatically at intervals, even without anyone bowling. Archie Voss was 22 years old. He wasn't an employee, but he had a reputation for sneaking into closed buildings and pushing himself into places marked off limits. He liked the thrill of proving he could go further than others. That night, his motive was simple: climb into the restricted machinery zone and see how far inside he could fit. Honestly, that doesn't sound brave to me. It just feels like taking a massive, unnecessary risk with your own life. Archie stepped past the markings that separated the public lanes from the machinery. He deliberately climbed into one of the pin setter assemblies, wedging himself inside. The system was still energized, capable of cycling automatically. Indicator lights on the unit showed it was active, but he either didn't recognize what they meant or ignored them. He crouched deeper into the structure, pressing himself between the metal framework and moving parts, testing how far he could go. The space was tight, filled with mechanical arms, bars, and panels designed to move in a fixed sequence. The air inside felt warmer, heavy with the smell of oil and worn rubber, making the space feel even more confined. As Archie shifted his weight further inside, his arm brushed against a sensor, and part of the mechanism meant to detect pin position. The system registered the movement as a reset condition. Instead of waiting for the timed cycle, the machine initiated immediately, triggered by his own contact while he was still inside. The sweep bar descended to clear the lane surface. He stayed beneath the assembly, pressed into the space. Then, the table mechanism lowered. Metal arms and pin holders came down in sequence. The assembly closed downward with mechanical force. His upper body was trapped between the descending table and the fixed rear frame of the machine. The compression collapsed his chest cavity, and his neck was pinned against the metal structure. The machine continued its programmed motion, unable to detect obstruction inside that area. The system completed its cycle before returning to its reset position. The alley stayed closed through the night. The next day, during a security check, staff noticed signs of forced entry. After shutting down power to the system, they found Archie inside the machine. Death was confirmed at the scene. The cause was crushing injuries consistent with mechanical compression. Investigators explained that the energized system, combined with unauthorized entry, directly led to the accident. The property owner disconnected power to all remaining systems afterward. The official conclusion was clear. Archie Voss died because he entered a closed bowling alley, climbed into an energized pin setter, and was caught during its automatic cycle. It was ruled preventable, caused by trespassing and unsafe behavior. The investigators closed the case with a clear finding. Unauthorized entry into an energized automated system was the direct cause. It wasn't fate or chance. It was preventable. And when I think about it more, I realize how much this shows the ripple effect of trespassing. Archie's death didn't just affect him. The staff who found him had to live with that image, and his family had to face the fact that he died in a place he wasn't supposed to be. Even beyond that, it highlights how property owners are forced to change things after tragedies like this. In this case, they disconnected power to all remaining systems, not because they wanted to, but because they had to make sure no one else could repeat the same mistake. Archie went looking for a thrill, pushing himself further than he should have. But the next story is quieter, just a simple shortcut, a small decision, one that slowly turns into something he can't get out of. It was August 28, 2016 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A municipal water treatment facility sat fenced off, with warning signs posted around the property. The walkways inside were marked to guide workers safely around the open treatment tanks. Those tanks were deep, filled with moving water, and the restricted zones were labeled with clear fall hazard warnings. Jeremy Blythe was 34 years old. He worked odd jobs and was known for cutting through properties to save time instead of following longer public routes. He had a stubborn streak, often ignoring rules if he thought they slowed him down. That night, his motive was simple. He wanted a shortcut. Instead of walking around the tanks on the designated path, he chose to cross directly between them on a narrow divider. I've taken shortcuts before, but hearing this makes me realize some paths are blocked for a reason. Saving a few minutes isn't worth risking your life. The divider was about 12 to 16 inches wide. It was damp with residue, slick enough to reduce traction. Jeremy stepped onto it and began walking across, balancing above a basin about 10 to 12 feet deep. The tank below contained aerated water, bubbling and swirling with constant turbulence. He was halfway across when his foot slipped on the wet surface. He fell sideways into the basin and went under immediately. The water wasn't normal. It was heavily aerated, filled with air bubbles that reduced its density, making it much harder for a person to stay afloat. When Jeremy surfaced, the turbulence pushed against him unevenly. Each time he tried to rise, the churning water disrupted his balance and pulled parts of his body back under. The basin walls were smooth vertical concrete with no ladder access nearby. There were no handholds, and the slick surface made climbing out nearly impossible. When Jeremy tried to orient himself, the constant motion of the water made it difficult to tell which way to move. His breathing became irregular as waves and splashes repeatedly broke over his face. Unlike calm water, the aeration made it harder for him to keep his head above the surface for more than a moment at a time. He submerged multiple times, each attempt weaker than the last, before going under completely. I can't help but think how terrifying that must have been. The facility stayed quiet through the night. The next morning, staff arrived for routine inspection. They noticed signs of trespassing and discovered Jeremy in the basin after shutting down the system. Emergency responders recovered his body. Death was confirmed as drowning following a fall into the active treatment tank. Investigators explained that his choice to trespass, combined with using the divider as a shortcut, directly caused the accident. The property owner later installed additional barriers and coverings along divider access points to prevent anyone else from trying the same shortcut. The official conclusion was clear. Jeremy Blythe died because he entered a restricted facility, ignored warning signs, and chose to cross a divider above an active tank. His death was ruled preventable, caused by trespassing and unsafe behavior. And here's what stays with me. Jeremy wasn't trying to steal or cause harm. He was simply trying to get somewhere faster. That's what makes it feel so senseless. To me, it's proof that even small acts of impatience can carry huge consequences. What makes this case even more striking is how ordinary the decision seemed. Walking across a divider probably felt like a harmless trick to shave off minutes. But the divider wasn't built for walking. It was built to separate tanks. The investigators closed the case with a clear finding: unauthorized entry into a restricted facility and unsafe use of a divider were the direct causes. It wasn't fate or chance. It was preventable. And when I think about it more, I realize how much this shows the ripple effect of trespassing. Jeremy's death didn't just affect him. The staff who found him had to live with that image, and his family had to face the fact that he died in a place he wasn't supposed to be. Even beyond that, it highlights how property owners are forced to change things after tragedies like this. In this case, they added barriers and restricted access points, not because they wanted to, but because they had to make sure no one else could repeat the same mistake. A simple shortcut turned into a situation where there was no easy way out once things went wrong, especially in an environment designed for treatment, not human survival. And honestly, it makes me wonder about the mindset behind these choices. Jeremy wasn't trying to harm anyone, but he treated a dangerous facility like a shortcut trail. That's what makes this death feel so senseless.